It began with a lost line from an old account book and unraveled into something nobody could have anticipated. Janelle believed they were creating a future together until a secret deed, silent payments, and one astonishing placard unearthed a truth hidden deep beneath Coyote Pass. If you've ever wondered who you can actually trust, this one will resonate. Watch now, because the true story was never on camera. It began with a piece of paper. Nothing dramatic, no grand moment, just a tiny, minor detail hidden amongst a stack of forgotten paperwork. But sometimes, that's how truth arrives, quietly, unspectacular, unwelcome. Janelle was by herself that day. No cameras, no producers, no scripted sound bites. She was alone, along with a pile of dusty folders and a nagging suspicion that something wasn't quite right. She had been going through the final bits and pieces of what had once been shared life, the life where everything was ours. The property, the money, the aspirations, or so she had believed. It was a highlighted note, one line from an outside accountant, one parcel, not reported, reported under one name, Cody W. Brown, a $500,000 worth of property, and no other soul knew it even existed. Now, if you're a longtime follower of Sister Wives, you likely recall how much anticipation rested upon that dry Arizona land, Coyote Pass. It was meant to be an emblem of restoration, a clean slate where the family could create anew after decades of fissures and silent sorrows. But what if the canvas you were painting on wasn't yours to start with? This story isn't about petty arguments or tabloid headlines. It's about trust, about the cost of silence, and the way even long-married couples can live in entirely different realities without ever knowing it. Maybe you've seen it before. The slow unraveling of someone who once promised they were all in. The shift in tone, the careful words, the sense that decisions are being made behind closed doors. It seeps in gradually at first. A lost conversation, a white fib, then suddenly, one day, you find you're gazing at a stranger in front of the dinner plate. For Janelle, that awareness wasn't accompanied by shouting an argument. It came in fragments, a gesture here, a payment there, a voice note stashed for too long. And piecemeal, a picture developed, one that looked an awful lot less like unity and an awful lot like an escape plan. But she didn't hold it inside. Late one evening, she phoned Christine. Near midnight, tight voice, not knowing if she should be angry or merely heartbroken. I believe he's been concealing land, and I believe we've been paying him for it. And with that, the dam burst. Christine didn't question her. She didn't have to. She simply said, "Send me everything." Now, depending on how long you've been watching Sister Wives, you might have noticed some of these cracks appearing along the way. Cody's movement towards one wife, the tension that never quite got resolved, the grand promises that quietly deflated. But what you didn't see, what nobody saw, was the trail that he was leaving behind. A stealthy redirection of funds, a title to property in his name alone, a paper trail that led not to reconciliation, but to retreat. And here's the thing. We're not discussing just monetary betrayal. We're discussing the weight of knowing the family you spent decades constructing, brick by brick, kid by kid, is perhaps only whole in your mind. What do you do when the house you envisioned never had a front door for you? For Christine, for Janelle, even Mary, it wasn't about land. It was about being erased from the future they assisted in creating, a future they sacrificed to create. And the best part? At least one of Cody's children claims to have already known about that secret lot, because he shared with them, just not their mothers. So while the women were being told to hold out, to hold on, to have faith in the plan, Cody had already gone. Not in his heart, literally, strategically. He'd made his claim, literally. Picture yourself standing on that ground, the ground you once referred to as ours, and seeing in the ground a placard, future site, Cody Brown, custom build. No signatures, no crest of family, only his name. It's a pause that freezes you. And if you've ever put yourself into a relationship, a house, a dream, only to discover someone else had a plan B all the while, then you know darn well exactly how that had to feel. Because this isn't just their story. For many of us, particularly those of us who've endured long marriages, second chances, or hard-won wisdom, this is the kind of heartbreak that hits close to home. The kind that arrives quietly, with forms, and a call that turns everything around. So as the dust settles on Coyote Pass, one thing is certain. This is not a review of an episode of a reality show. This is the backstory behind the show. The one that happened when the cameras were turned off. The one that the viewer felt but never quite perceived. The one in which 3 women ceased waiting to be invited to join in and began demanding to be heard. Because this time, the truth wasn't hidden in the drama. It was filed in the county office, stamped, signed, and forgotten. Until now, let's go back and look at how it all went down, how it began, what was promised, and where things went that no one saw coming. Because this tale, it's not about what Kody constructed. It's about what he left behind. Let's start. It all began with something minor, just a line missing in the Coyote Pass ledger. The type of detail most people wouldn't even catch. But Janelle did. She had been going through old documents, attempting to reconcile the books she used to keep with Kody. Even after all that had transpired, she was still doing her share in tidying up the chaos. Behind closed doors, without cameramen, without producers, just her and the documents. And that's when she saw it. A note, plain, unvarnished, and marked by an independent accountant she'd brought in to review what she was certain was family property. One plot, unlisted, mentioned only in Cody W. Brown's name. Approximate worth? $500,000. And for some reason, it had never been reported before. Janelle stood there. Initially, she believed that perhaps it was an error, a clerical mistake. But as she went through the paperwork surrounding it, things began to fall in place. And for the worse. This land wasn't one of the shared family plots. It wasn't part of the 4-way split they'd all supposedly agreed on. No, this was different, hidden, quietly tucked away. And worst of all, it was in Kody's name alone. But here's the thing. Janelle wasn't just uncovering a forgotten lot. She was peeling back the first layer of what might have been a much bigger secret. Insiders described her as amazed. I mean, Janelle had invested her heart in that property. She'd been the one strolling the rocky ridges with planners, envisioning her own tiny container house, hoping for a do-over. And here she was gazing at the threat that Kody had staked a private chunk of it out for himself all the while. Then came the kicker. Somewhere in the papers, she discovered evidence that the land hadn't simply been reserved, it had been financed gradually, little by little. Small payments year after year. And some of those funds? They could have been drawn from the joint family LLC, the one she assumed they'd closed years ago. She couldn't comprehend it, and perhaps even more horrific, she had no clue if the other wives were aware. I continued to glance at my sister wives, she later told her story, just hoping for some glimmer that somebody else knew what was happening, because I sure didn't. And then it all clicked into place. Kody's big push to have everyone living together in one home. The speech about sacrifice, about unity, it began to feel like something different, something deliberate. That was when Janelle made that call. It was close to midnight when Christine received the call from Janelle. Christine had assumed that it would be a friendly update, perhaps the kids. But then Janelle delivered it. One sentence. I think he's been concealing land, and I think we've been footing the bill. Christine stiffened. Her entire body went rigid. She did not even utter a question. Send me everything, she instructed. Now. And Janelle sent it. She sent all the printouts, all the scans, all the folders she'd been quietly amassing in the background. Because if what they were looking at was actually real, then everything they'd been told about how that territory was divided could have been a cover-up. The open discussion on camera, the family's shared dream, perhaps it was all a masterfully rehearsed diversion. And here's the frightening part. What if this hadn't been a recent decision? What if Kody had been planning this from the very beginning? Christine didn't sleep that night. Instead, she stayed up combing through the documents, one page at a time. Christine pored over late into the evening, page after page laid out before her. County documents, hand-drawn floor plans, dated maps of land surveys, and technical terms she hadn't given much consideration to previously. But one thing was increasingly apparent. This wasn't an afterthought. Kody hadn't accidentally ended up on that piece of land. No, this had been intentional. That lot was the most hidden corner of Coyote Pass, squished at the border, where the land slopes softly into the Arizona hills. It had a potential driveway entrance of its own, sufficient space for a private gate, ideal for a person who didn't need an audience, someone who wasn't merely fantasizing about a family house, but solitude. And suddenly, that old one-house vision Kody had pitched came rushing back. Back then, he'd described a shared mansion, one entrance, 4 sections. To the left, he'd said, you'd have Robyn and Janelle. Then my house would be in the center. Mary and Christine would be on the right. At the time, it sounded strange. But now, it felt like a disguise. Because who has ever heard of a plural husband designing an arrangement where he gets his own personal space, but the wives have to share walls? Christine recalled thinking, wait a second, you signed on to this life too, didn't you? How is it that he gets to define privacy, while the rest of us are just supposed to cope? That one house concept, which at one time had seemed so unworkable, now seemed like something else altogether. Camouflage. An astute diversion. Christine started to wonder the entire Unity speech had been a cover story, intended to demonstrate allegiance, while Kody was secretly setting things up for an exit strategy. And when the wives pushed back, when they didn't fall in love with the big mansion dream, Kody threw it out. Like that. The dream of one big family sharing one roof disappeared, and he shifted gears. He began to subdivide the land. And by the new papers, he took the best section for himself. But here's the worst part. While the others were still struggling to keep the family intact, Kody might already have been living without them. Christine couldn't help but think about it. The Kody she knew, who struggled for oneness, who sacrificed for the family, was gone, it seemed. He's forgotten who his kids are, she later declared. He's forgotten who he married. In the meantime, Janelle was recalling just how dedicated she'd been. She was the one who had moved into an RV on property close to it. She was the one who had fought for it like it was holy ground. And now it appeared that her dedication had served to help Kody get a personal retreat he never intended to share. She attempted to maintain spirits high. I've got to say something good, she explained, half laughing with the frustration, because I am losing it. The land had previously symbolized hope, a new beginning, a future together. But now it merely reminded her of each and every moment that Kody had assured they'd work it out together, even as he was filing behind her back in his own name. And those past house blueprints, Christine recalled them very well. The way Kody explained how the layout worked, every wife had her own kitchen and area. Robyn's kitchen, Janelle's kitchen, Christine's kitchen, Mary's kitchen. But here's the catch. They wouldn't actually be homes. They'd be sections, units, all walled off with heavy dividers, literally constructed of concrete. A blockhouse, he referred to it, designed for privacy. And the man who once declared he desired unity now desired separation. He even cut off questions in the middle of discussion at one point. Hold your thoughts, he told me. Just give me a second. And that's what lingered with Christine. He wasn't asking. He was creating something, emotionally and structurally, that didn't allow for compromise. Christine couldn't get one detail out of her head. She kept returning to that early floor plan, the one from Kody's one-house presentation. On paper, it was fine. Every wife had her own wing, her own kitchen, and a sense of privacy. But there was something odd about Kody's part. He hadn't tagged it like the others. Robyn's area was marked clearly. So were Mary's, Janelle's, and Christine's. But Kody's space, it didn't say Kody and Robyn. It didn't even say Dad's room. It simply said, my house. And in the corner of that design, a 10-bay garage. Everybody at the time assumed it was Kody being Kody. Wacky. But with hindsight and a thick folder of paperwork, Christine realized differently. That wasn't a peculiarity. That was a blueprint. A test run for the private haven he might have been designing all along. And worse, if Janelle and Christine were correct, Kody had done it all in the open, during sermons on togetherness, while shooting heart-to-hearts about mending the family. So of course, one thing nagged at them. What else had he concealed? The next morning, Christine appeared at Janelle's front door, carrying a suitcase in one hand and a pile of printouts in the other. I want to see it for myself, she told her. There were no producers present, no cameras, no makeovers. Only 2 women standing in the sun outside Arizona with years of mutual history and a heavy weight of distrust between them. They sat on the porch and laid it all out before them. Maps, tax forms, escrow statements, and one very revealing deed transfer. Janelle indicated it. There it was, a tax return filed only after Christine had formally exited the family. The timing couldn't be more precise. Christine gazed at it in shock. So, while we were mourning the breakdown of the family, she breathed, he was already sealing his escape plan. They continued digging, and that's when they discovered something more disturbing. A bank transfer trail. Round figures, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, drawn out of what appeared to be a joint family account. It was sent to an unknown LLC. Neither of them knew the name, but a search turned up the LLC as the purchaser of the parcel now in Cody's name. And supposedly, it was a shell company he'd established on the side. Nobody had ever spoken of it. And to make matters worse, the address associated with that LLC was a Flagstaff P.O. box. The very same one that Cody had used for his sole business filings, the year Christine departed. Christine didn't even blink. I knew he was finished with us well before he said it out loud, she said to Janelle, but I didn't expect him to be so calculating. And just when they figured it couldn't get any worse, they found out Cody hadn't betrayed their trust. By just doing it, he hadn't even attempted to keep it in secret. That may have been the most surprising aspect. For all the stealth, for all the behind-the-scenes scheming, Cody hadn't exactly kept his footprints from showing, not as he believed he had. With each piece of paperwork they underlined, each signed name they encircled. The reality was becoming increasingly difficult to refute. Cody wasn't merely distancing himself from the family, he'd been rewriting history about what he'd done for and with them. The tale of the broken-hearted patriarch left behind? It was beginning to unravel. And they did know one thing. Approaching him wouldn't just be a matter of emotions. It would be explosive. So Christine picked up the phone and dialed Mary. As Christine and Janelle sat with all that they'd learned, the same two questions kept going round and round in their heads. Had Cody always planned for that fifth lot to be his own private escape? And was he secretly moving funds around to get it, while all the time pretending they were figuring it out together? They didn't know anything anymore. What they were certain of, however, was that it was time to get some legal clarity. Not to begin a fight, not yet, but to know exactly what Cody could legally do with that land. Because if it was in his name but paid for with pooled family money, that would open the door to something much larger. They were just getting ready to pack everything away when one of their phones vibrated. The message was from a number they didn't recognize. Only a few words, but it gave them the shiver. I know what he's doing. Meet me. Christine read it out loud. There was no saved name and no other information, just that single sentence. Janelle wrote back, cautious but curious. Why now? The response came quickly. Because you finally discovered the land. I thought you never would. They sat and looked at each other, speechless. The message was from someone they hadn't heard from in years. A former crew member who had simply disappeared from the show during the season 17 shoot. No drama, no goodbye post, just vanished, like he'd stepped off the stage and disappeared. And now, amid all that was going on, he was back. They had agreed to see him the following day at a small, unobtrusive cafe on the edge of Flagstaff, the kind of place where no one looks too hard, and locals are left to their own devices. He was tired-looking when he arrived, pale and gaunt-looking. He didn't have a lot to say initially, merely slid a manila envelope down the table and remarked, "This is from the season that didn't air. Your one-house meeting, the raw footage, not the edit." Inside were production stills, floor plans, screenshots, notes that had never appeared on camera. Not the refined version America had seen. These were raw, hand-annotated, behind-the-scenes scrawls from the crew. And there it was again, on Cody's suggested blueprint, in bold block print, my house. Not dad's suite, not family living room, just my house. More appalling? The date. From the date stamp on the document, this copy of the blueprint had been printed days prior to Cody ever summoning the family for that supposed brainstorming session. The choice had already been made. The crew member leaned in and whispered, "We were instructed to shoot it like a group conversation." But it wasn't. He was not soliciting your opinions. He was displaying his plan to leave. That word again, exit. It had trailed behind them out of the financial documents, through the transfer of deeds, and now into the possession of one who had witnessed the truth unfolding from behind the lens. And as they scrolled through additional pages within that envelope, more handwritten scribbles started to show. There was more than just blueprints within that envelope. Handwritten notes from producers revealed a larger story. Shelved, never to be aired. On the corner of Kody's floor plan was one sticky note. "Doesn't this keep him away from everyone?" Another had written, "Christine is clearly uncomfortable. Should we comment?" But nothing ever materialized from those questions. The narrative was incorporated into the normal chaos, family tension, shifting allegiances, and the audience never had any idea what was actually taking place behind the scenes. Christine glanced over at Janelle and Mary, her tone low but firm. He didn't just decide to do this, he practiced it, he planned it out, he created an escape home and labeled it Unity. That was when Janelle got up and spoke what everyone was thinking. "We have to go to Coyote Pass, now." They left as the sun was setting, rolling a golden, orange, and purple wash across the Arizona hills. It was the sort of night that normally seemed peaceful, calm, but not tonight. When they arrived at the disputed lot, all seemed as it had always seemed, quiet, still, unmarked. But Christine noticed something new this time. New tire tracks, deep ones, cutting directly into the dirt road that led only to that piece of land. Someone had visited. Recently. Mary got out of the vehicle and looked around. And that's when she saw it. Something half hidden in the underbrush along the fence. She picked it out and extracted it from the weeds. A white sign, knocked over by the breeze. The lettering was indistinct but readable. "Future site, Cody Brown custom build." Everyone remained silent for a long moment. The three women simply stood there, gazing at the sign as if it had been hewn out of betrayal itself. This was no longer speculation. It wasn't theory. It was a statement. Kody hadn't simply dreamed up his own space, he'd literally staked it into the ground. Christine knelt and swept dust away from the bottom corner of the placard. There it was, almost concealed. A printed date. 6 months since she quit the family. That wasn't an accident. The land transfer, the LLC, the clandestine planning sessions. It all fell into place, and now they had tangible evidence. Kody wasn't investing in a future together. He was creating a solo one. Janelle got out her phone and began taking pictures. Every tire track, every corner of the property, every small detail that suddenly didn't look like a family aspiration, and more like a clandestine building site. Walking the perimeter of the property, something else caught her attention. Stakes in the ground with colored flags, property lines, pre-construction markers, preliminary work. This wasn't in Kody's head. Based on a source close to the area planning board, there had been a question submitted months prior, requesting zoning modifications for a private home on Lot 5, and it was requested by the same LLC that Christine and Janelle had discovered during the audit. Christine faced Mary, her voice strained. "If he's this far along, and nobody informed us, what else is already underway?" This wasn't a breach of trust any longer. It was a breach of time, of money, of years of work they'd invested in the fantasy that Coyote Pass was ever intended to reunite the family. Mary, who had remained silent through so many family dysfunctions in the past, did not this time. "He lied," she said, "to all of us, and now he's constructing the lie." And the timing couldn't have been worse. TLC was just beginning to promote next season. Teasers full of optimistic language about healing, moving on, becoming stronger. But behind the camera, a very different story was playing out. One no producer could have written. And then there was one more part of the puzzle. A fan in Flagstaff had just seen Kody at a building supply warehouse, stocking lumber in the bed of his truck. When they inquired about what project he was doing, he smiled and said, allegedly, just setting up something peaceful, for when things get quieter. Peaceful? For whom? With the last of the daylight fading behind the hills, Christine took one last photograph of the dropped placard. She sent it to her lawyer. No caption, just the picture. 10 minutes passed before her phone vibrated. "We need to talk, tomorrow." As they were turning back towards the vehicle, Janelle's phone started ringing again. But this time, it was not a text message. It was a PayPal alert. A payment had been made. Not to her, not to Christine, not even to Mary. The money had been paid directly out of the old family LLC into Kody's own LLC. Janelle's jaw clenched. She glared at the screen. It wasn't a huge sum, less than $3,000, but the timing stung. Barely an hour after facing the ground he was about to make his own, Kody had transferred money again, silent as a ghost, untraceable as a whisper. like nobody would ever see it. Christine crept closer and spotted it too. She didn't waste time. "He's still using the name of the family to finance his solo career," she stated. And that's when the tone changed, from suspicion to something more pointed: outrage. The next morning, Christine sat down with her lawyer in a tiny office off downtown Flagstaff. Janelle and Mary joined by video conference, and they went through it all, every step of the timeline. From the time Kody floated the big one-house vision, to the plots of land at Coyote Pass, to the transfers to the LLC, the bank statements, the custom-build permit sign, and now, real-time payments still draining a joint family account, weeks after the family itself had dissolved. The lawyer didn't hesitate. If community funds were spent to buy or prepare property held in the sole name of Kody, that is potentially very serious legal trouble. Maybe financial misrepresentation, the attorney said. Even possible breach of oral contract, particularly if there had been an assumption of co-ownership. And that was precisely what they were attempting to establish. They weren't out for revenge. They were seeking accountability. But while they were concentrating on the facts, fallout was already widening. In behind-the-scenes machinations, TLC production allegedly went into complete panic mode. Cameras had caught family tension and embarrassing arguments, sure. But this was a higher plane. If suddenly legal action was in the air, everything was different. Taping could be shut down. Insurance policies might come into question. And worst case, even the executives of the network might get dragged in as potential witnesses if it was discovered the show had, even accidentally, misrepresented the reality at Coyote Pass. One of the producers claimed to have summoned an emergency meeting at 6 a.m., the morning after Christine sent the placard photo in their text. The subject line? Property crisis, immediate strategy needed. What was to be a season of healing and introspection was now threatening to devolve into a full-blown legal and reputational catastrophe. But for Christine, Janelle, and Mary, the show was the last thing on their minds. This wasn't about ratings or plot lines. This was about principle. About every time Kody insisted, "We're a team." About every promise that they'd make decisions together. And now, realizing he'd been planning a future that left them out entirely, it wasn't just painful, it was infuriating. And as all of this unfolded, Robyn stayed silent. Too silent. And that's what started to make Christine nervous. Because if Robyn truly didn't know about the fifth lot, she'd be furious. But if she did know and remained silent, well, that was a very different brand of betrayal. As they dug deeper into timelines, receipts, and paper trails, suddenly there was something else. A new voice on the conversation. But it wasn't one of the wives, or a lawyer, or a producer. It was one of the Brown children. They'd seen the placard photo online. It had started circulating in fan groups. An image of that fallen, future site, Cody Brown custom-build sign. And it didn't take long for the older kids to start noticing. The message came through Instagram, of all places. A quiet DM from one of Kody's adult sons. "We'll keep his name private out of respect." It said simply, "That's the lot Dad said he was setting aside for when things calm down. He never told me it was family property." Christine stood stiff as a board. Kody hadn't only kept this secret from the wives, he'd spoken freely about it with at least one of their children, told them a part of the truth while providing the rest of the family with a whole other tale. And sources close to the family say that wasn't the only contradiction. In the past year, Kody had supposedly informed several of his adult children that he hoped to one day construct a secluded spot, just for him, not a vacation home for the family. Not a destination to be shared with others, a place where they could visit him. Janelle called her eldest son on the phone right away. His response left her speechless. Yes, he affirmed. Dad had said something similar to that 2 years ago, about the time Christine was leaving to go to Utah. It hadn't meant anything then, just a throwaway statement. But now it was chilling to remember, because if Kody had been laying emotional groundwork with his kids for a solo future, while feeding the wives a hopeful tale of healing and reunion, then this wasn't simply miscommunication. It was deliberate. Christine continued reading over one of the messages from a child she raised. It read, "Honestly, I thought you knew. He made it sound like everyone was fine with it." The fan base, meanwhile, went nuts. Hashtags, #Coyote cover-up, and #Kody cash out started trending. Armchair detectives began poring over county documents, decoding drone footage, and even matching up vintage TV screen grabs to piece together the truth about Coyote Pass. And in each and every one of those theories, one searing question kept resurfacing. When did Kody stop playing along as if this was some kind of family fantasy and begin constructing his own fortress? Even Mary, who'd been quietly pushed aside for years, was rattled. She spoke to a trusted friend, insiders indicate, and her words were laced with pain. "I stood up for that man more times than I can remember, and he was building a future in which I wasn't included at all." By this time, the private group conversation of Christine, Janelle, and Mary had become something more tactical. They were exchanging screenshots, voice notes, even preliminary drafts of a public joint statement. They weren't hastening to put it out, but don't think for a second they were preparing. And just as they were planning their next step, Robyn finally spoke up. But what she said wasn't like a denial. It was like damage control. Robyn's reaction didn't come through the show. It wasn't a confessional, not an interview, not even a blog entry. It arrived as a voicemail on Mary's phone, late at night, and insiders say it wasn't casual. "I just want you to know," Robyn allegedly said, "this isn't what I wanted. I didn't know he filed anything under his own name. He told me everything was still being figured out." But Mary could hear it, the tension in Robyn's voice. It sounded measured, like she was meticulously picking every word. Not quite panicked, but definitely defensive. And the most telling part? Not once did she say we. Not "we're figuring this out." Not "we'll make it right." Just him. Christine and Janelle listened to the message on speaker, and the look on their faces said it all. Janelle looked completely worn down, not just physically, but emotionally. It was the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from one bad week. It resulted from years of working hard to keep something intact, while the other person quietly walked out. For now, it was all so plain. Kody hadn't just wandered off. He'd been charting his exit since the first crack in their marriages occurred. And the worst part? He nearly succeeded. If Janelle hadn't looked a little further, if she hadn't insisted on having an outside accountant examine the past books, if that one suspicious note had never come to light, Kody could have built his whole retreat under their noses. He could have explained it was just for a short time to them, or that it was for the grandkids, something, or that it was something the family can all utilize someday. But the trail of money paints a very different picture. This was not for the family, not for Robyn, not for the kids. This was for him, constructed with resources and trust from the very people he abandoned. Up until now, sources near the family indicate that Janelle, Christine, and Mary are considering their options. They have not yet confirmed any formal legal proceedings, but the terminology in their backroom talks is changing. Breach of verbal agreement, intentional misrepresentation, jointly earned equity, words that speak to more than disillusionment. They speak to possible legal turf. The narrative they'd been sold, that Coyote Pass was a new beginning, a tabula rasa for all, had coiled into something else altogether. Not a communal home, but an edifice to ego, to secrecy, to a $500,000 asylum of solitude, financed by women who once thought they were building a life together. And the question now becomes, will Kody own up before he's dragged into it? Or will the women who constructed that family, who paid for that land, call him out first? Because this time, the truth isn't in the drama. It's in the deed. Let us know in the comments. Do you believe Kody had it planned all along to leave everyone behind? And should Janelle, Christine, and Mary sue him? Don't forget to like, subscribe my channel, and hang in there. The video on your screen that follows is next. And believe me, you won't want to miss it.